Call the meeting to order. Do a
Recording.
roll call.
Kristen Gajewski.
Here.
Jana Barnett. Here. Steve Brenner.
Here.
Jen Reimer. Here. Chris Valente.
Here.
This is a public meeting that is being recorded for public viewing at a later time. Do we have any public comment today pertaining to the agenda? No. All right, we can move on then. What did you want to skip ahead to, Michelle?
I was going to skip ahead to the utility coordinator position because it'll be a very brief discussion. In fairness, that the union attorney is still reviewing the job description, I would just request to table all action on that item until next month. We're meeting with the union Thursday to talk through all of that.
Motion to table the utility coordinator position.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, then that will be tabled.
And then we can also skip ahead to the fire department, the resignation notice from Captain Seitz that was provided with your packet. Just a motion to accept his resignation notice.
Second. With regret.
My only question, and will we do some sort of an exit interview with him to get any more insight into his decision, or is that?
I mean, I've had that conversation with him. We could talk about that in executive session.
Okay. Okay, all right, then we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, and then should we move forward to payday?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Scott Barrett had commented at the finance meeting about moving payday to Friday from Thursday because that would resolve the issue of department heads having to log in and approve payroll on Sundays. I erroneously thought it was called out in at least one of the collective bargaining agreements. After checking the CBAs, it is not. I had conversations individually with each of the union presidents for the three unions, asking if there would be any argument if we talked about moving payday back one day, with the understanding they would be given advance notice weeks before it would happen. All three of them said no issue. So the place where it is called out that payday is on a Thursday is in the employee handbook. Give me 1 second.
Page 13.
Sorry, thank you. So the draft that's up on the screen, I changed the language to say that employees are paid bi-weekly on Friday. This would need to go to council for approval. And then if it is approved, I put together a draft memo that would go out the day after the March council meeting to all departments, notifying them that effective with pay period ending Saturday, April 4th, payday will be changed from bi-weekly on Thursday to bi-weekly Friday, with payday falling on April 11th and subsequently remaining on Fridays moving forward.
April 11th. Saturday.
Should be a Friday. You're right. I will update that.
Okay, so April 10th. So give me a second. Because the last day of the year is a Thursday. If that's a payroll week, could be another thing you have to look into. Figure this out. 4, 8, 22,
Well, but
5,
she's
9.
not saying that the pay week changes. It's just the date the check is issued.
14, 28, 11, 25, 9, 23, 6, 20, 4, 18, 5. It does, of course it does. The way I did.
Is it going to be a 3? Well,
So you'll have one less pay, they'll get one less pay this calendar year.
Right. I mean, but they're still going to get paid the next day. So You're still getting paid for 360.
I haven't done the math because I just thought of this, but that sounds like they're getting 25 days in the calendar year, so it'll affect their taxes, it'll affect their contributions for the calendar year, all that stuff.
What do you say, Tom?
Our last payday for the year is the 24th of December. So the pay period is the 20th then through the 2nd of January. So we'd be paid actually Christmas, 25th.
Oh, you're getting paid on, did I do the counting wrong?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure.
Oh,
If
I did the counting wrong.
So I know why I got.
sorry, I didn't, if that's the case, then we don't have a problem, hold on.
Yes, every,
Currently, the 24th of December is the last pay check that received
So there's,
in the calendar year 2020.
so a payday is gonna be effective pay, paid on the 11th, which should be the 10th, right?
Yes.
24.
What's the date of our checks?
The live checks, there's only 2 live checks.
Okay, so when are we making the transfers? On a Thursday, really, right?
No, we make the transfer currently, currently payroll's processed and transmitted Monday. The funds transfer happens Tuesday.
To the employees?
Or 8.
No, I mean, direct deposit, depending who you're with, like my direct deposit actually currently hits on a Wednesday morning. So, I mean, that was a conversation with the union as well, as a lot of employees' bank accounts, even though we're supposed to get paid on Thursday, the direct deposit shows up on a Wednesday. So in reality, they'll still be getting paid on a Thursday. But there are 2 live checks that go out with every payroll. Those checks are currently held and not physically handed over until Thursday, and then would get moved to Friday.
Okay, so if December 31st were on
I got you getting 3 paid in December.
Thursday, and we transmitted, we wired the funds on the 30th or 31st, even though technically it's not due until the 1st. Is their W-2 going to reflect that payment on December 30th or 31st?
The way I just looked at this,
Now, I don't-
the last pay is December 31st. I've done it 3 times. I could be wrong all 3. If you move it to January 1st, they get paid on January 1st. Those wages go to
But we
2027.
wouldn't, because the banks are closed, we would move payday up. I mean, there are times like, so this year, we got paid the week of Christmas, and because the banks were closed, we moved, they give Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday. We get paid Wednesday, not Thursday.
Okay, so if that's the case and the number of pays don't change, then there should not be an issue.
The cash basis, just think, when do I receive the cash? This year or next year? It's a cash basis account, as far as the W-2s are concerned.
Yeah, so
You get paid on the
John, you
second-
double check that. We do every 2 weeks, you get paid. On a Thursday, every 2
I
weeks.
just don't understand the problem.
That's I'll show you.
The problem is if you paid a check on January 1st, all that income that they earned in 25, 26 would go to 27.
So,
but that happens like every year,
yeah, so what?
Sure.
like, because you find out in the
They have-
pay
then they
period
would have-
of that.
Then they would have potentially 26, 7 pays maybe next year, and then 25
I
this
think they
year.
had an extra last year, didn't they?
Correct.
Yeah, like every year it
27.
overlaps, because if it ends a couple days after the new year, if the pay is a few days after the new year, then
Is after.
you get paid like, because then we
Sorry.
pay their 27 wages. We would give them 27 wages in the end of 26 if their pay period overlapped.
Then you get a check, or is that the last day you get?
That's the last day I get a check, so there's a pay period, and that will be the 20th,
I don't care what it's for, so that's the day of the last check,
right there.
24th.
So it would
If
be
that's
the
the case, then
20th.
it doesn't matter, you're right. Instead of getting paid 23rd, you get the check the 24th. Or instead of getting 24th, you get the 25th.
Yeah.
Okay, then it's not a problem. I can't count.
All right,
That's once.
good to work it out.
Okay.
It's worked out.
I'll
It's
make,
valuable questions because it can impact the budget substantially.
Yeah.
Putting an extra pay in here.
I mean, I'm thinking of the employees, like, if you're receiving income-based assistance, I mean, it's 1 pay period. I don't know how significant
Pay
a
is really
change that would be,
25th.
but if it's going to 1 year, not the other, but if it's not falling in that last week, then it's
Of course, anyways, 'cause it's holiday. That week it would get moved.
Yeah, but as long as it's
but
not,
then it would impact
it's
the
not
following year.
paid on
It could
the
be higher.
31st. If you're gonna do the 1st or the 31st, so be it. That would have mattered either. Okay, we're good.
I would just respectfully request the date in the motion be changed from the 11th to the 10th.
I'll make a motion to, assuming it's not gonna change the number of pays in the calendar year, from Thursday to Friday, beginning Friday, April 10th.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Now, circle back then to,
I would like to introduce Mike Miller from Eckert Siemens. Mike is our labor counsel, so he is involved in anything involving personnel issues, heavy lean on all of the union issues.
Great. Good afternoon to everybody. I did a slide deck because I'm impulsive like that. So let me just do two things. One, my name is Michael Miller. I am a partner in the law firm of Eckert Siemens in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I've done this for 30 years. My father was on borough council. My mother was on the school board in the 70s, and I drank the Kool-Aid. And it's all I've done for 30 years. I started out as a government attorney, and that's what I do now. I actually manage 32 lawyers, which, if you want to talk about bad jobs to have, that's one of them, because managing lawyers is no fun. But I do management side, labor and employment in the public and the private sector, but mainly the public sector. I represent boroughs and counties, the Commonwealth, and so on and so forth. And I do this training a lot for the State Association, Township Supervisors, and for the Boroughs Association. In fact, I'm doing civil service training tomorrow for the Boroughs Civil Service, for the Boroughs Association. So I think there are just a couple points that I'd like to make in the brief time that I have available to me, especially for the newer members. The first thing is, managing the public sector is tougher. Why? Because in the private sector, if I have a bunch of lawyers, we spend this much time advising clients, it costs us this much money. If there's extra money, we all take our kind of conservative instincts and become socialists and try and take money from each other. That's called profit, right? That's how you split that up. In the public sector, there's nothing like that. There's no metric by which you are able to really tell how someone's doing a good job or a bad job, because the majority of compensation systems are based on length of service, right? You get paid as long as you're here, as long as you do a job. In addition, in the public sector, unlike the private sector, people get hired and they kind of think that's a job for life, right? I mean, that you expect to stay at a public sector job most of your career. Sometimes you're moving on, but that's kind of the idea. And that creates a lot of cognitive dissonance for lots of people, because they take what they know in the private sector and try and model it on the public sector. And it's a little bit different. And then we're going to talk about how. It's also a little bit different because when we talk about accountability, you can call it discipline, you can call it accountability, you can call it expectations. One of the things that's difficult, because again, in the private sector, somebody bills hours in my law job. I know who's billing their hours. I know who's doing the job. I have a record of who's doing a good job and a record of who's doing a bad job. In the public sector, how do we know? If for instance, if your metric is no one complains about public works, that would worry me, because everyone complains about public works and everyone complains about, it is a true story to say, I've been doing this a long time, I've gotten cynical, that if you pave the streets of Wyomissing with gold, 20% of your population would come out and say, the street in front of my house is not gold enough and the taxes are too high, because you can't please everyone. That's just the way, that's human nature. So the issue about public sector jobs is about learning to communicate what your expectations are. It starts with the job descriptions and the essential functions of the job. One of the beefs I have a lot of times in the public sector is you are under-resourced for human resources. You just are. If you had a budget the same size as the borough's budget, and you were a private company, you would have more resources. You would have another satisfied customer. You would also have more resources for HR, generally speaking, right? Here's another thing that's interesting about public sector. You guys insure more people than a similarly sized private sector business. That is a true story. You provide coverage for both an employee and the spouse and the family. You know what costs you money? The other adult. This is 58 years of Lebanon bologna and mayonnaise sandwiches, right? The Lipitor people send me a Christmas card. I have a medic alert bracelet that says helmets, right? Because I have that addiction, I have maintenance medications, right? That's what costs you money. That's some of the differences I'm trying to illustrate between private sector and public sector. One of the issues that we have in the public sector, because we don't have as many metrics, it's tougher to define our job, and we have to work harder to do the job descriptions. So I know Michelle, and I know the staff, I know the chief, work hard at looking at the job descriptions, defining the essential functions, but that is the Bible of starting with accountability. What's my job? What am I supposed to do? And the essential functions of a job are three things. There's what I do, right? Not everything, but most of the things. There's the physical nature of the job, right? I got to lift 150 pounds. I got to get in and out of a cab of this or whatever. And there's the technology part of the job. And one of the mistakes that we make as employers, both in the private and the public sector, is we don't go back and look at our job description updated every 3 years or so, because the computer software you're using now is outdated 3 years from now, and 5 years from now, and 7 years. If you're just pulling out the old job description, then you're costing yourself in terms of accountability, because people can say, well, that's not even accurate. That's an us problem, right? The other part is getting your managers, and I'm not talking about Michelle, chief, I'm talking about the sergeants, I'm talking about the foreman, I'm talking about the people who see people on a day-to-day basis, to marry up what the job is with the evaluation tool. One of the problems that we sometimes have in the public sector is when we promote somebody to foreman, we promote the best ditch digger. They're a great ditch digger. They really know how to use all the tools. Are they the best supervisor of people? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. And that's one of the things I wish we could do differently, and this is not Wyomissing, this is everywhere, is provide more training to frontline supervisors about what the job is and about some basics like timekeeping, like overtime, like attendance, because those are the people who have the most critical impact on your employees, right? Because Michelle, chief, other people can't be there all the time, and therefore that's an issue. The other thing is making clear that the employees know what their job is. You want happy employees? Tell them what their job is and be fair about it. Here's another secret about happy employees. There's always somebody in any organization who has been here for 30 years and takes Fridays off because they get to, or takes Mondays off. Do you know what that does? It pisses everybody else off. That's a legal term. And it irritates them. If you want to be a good supervisor, learn to deal with that person, right? Learn to hold them accountable. And it takes a while to build that muscle. And when you're dealing with the person at the counter and the snow and the water main break, sometimes it's tough to come back to HR stuff. But let me tell you something. How much of your budget is wages, pension, and healthcare?
68%.
68%. She doesn't spend 68% of her time managing people, but that's probably the percentage that we need to be doing, because your public-facing people are the people who divide services. And the fastest way to get a phone call to a municipal building is 2 public works trucks for more than 15 minutes at a Sheets. Because somebody's going to call and say, those are my tax dollars, and why aren't they out on the streets? Because that's what people do. It's another slide. Thanks.
So I feel like you have a lot of things that you identify as common problems and things to look out for.
Yeah.
Do you have easy solutions? Do you have low-hanging fruit? Do you have resources we can try to utilize to implement some of those into actionable steps?
Yeah, I think it starts with training of your supervisors so that they understand what the expectation is. Again, I think a lot of times in the public sector, you choose your supervisor based on who's best at the job. Training to manage people is different, right? And so we're starting with that perspective. A lot of times when I deal with school districts or I deal with public sector, I deal with private sector, the fairest and best boss isn't the boss that's nicest. It's the boss that says, this is what the job is, and coaches you instead of yells at you, tells you what the expectations are, and is smart enough to say you're not getting it done based on these criteria, which you can find in your job description, which I reviewed with you on the first day of your employment. John Wooden, the basketball coach at UCLA, used to have, his first practice was about putting your socks and your shoes on, which is something I've been doing since about 3, right? But he wanted it done the right way every time. And he went down, he broke it down to those basics. A lot of times we don't have time to do that, but that's kind of the culture that like to see and why. And that's that to my mind, that's the solution, is training on those basics. I don't know, and this is true again, in a lot of jobs, including at my law firm, whether or not we go back to, this is the job description, this is how we're going to manage to it. Because that's going to solve a lot of problems, because there are a lot of assumptions. If you've been a 25-year employee and somebody gets promoted over you, you know what you're going to say? Supervisors come and go. I've been here 25 years. I'm going to do the job my way. So that's kind of one of the things that I identify as an easy solution. Get to the next slide, please. Sorry, that's just my cheap way of getting a joke or a laugh. Next slide. I think that one of the things that we see about managers, right, and then we'll get into accountability or discipline. I think that one of the challenges we've had both on the police side and the other side, it used to be the formula was in the public sector, the salaries were a little bit lower, the benefits are a little bit better, and therefore that's the trade-off. That's not as true anymore. You know, police salaries are over 6 figures in the first 5 or 6 years of employment. And the benefits, because you get a defined benefit pension, meaning that after 25 years, 50 years of age, you can retire with half your salary, which is early. That's a system that was designed in the 50s when life expectancy was 58. So we now have people who are annuitants longer than they serve the actual borough, which puts a lot of stress on your pension plan. And so what I see coming down the road in the public sector is you're going to have to be choosier because your labor costs aren't going down and they're not leveling off. That's a constant issue that a good manager addresses, which is what is the intersection between what we're paying and what's sustainable and what we can afford, right? One of the things we don't see in the public sector is what you see at Home Depot. If you go to Home Depot in December, I can't go 50 feet without somebody saying, can I help you? If I go there now, I can go 12 aisles before, because they expand and contract their workforce. We don't do that. We hire. You know, the other thing that we do, just a general observation, somebody resigns and we hire automatically. We just got to fill that spot because there'll be overtime. I think it's important to fill that spot. I think it's important to have the right complement. I think sometimes we hire too quickly. I'll tell you another problem that we sometimes see. We hire and we don't get rid of them during their probationary period, because if I get rid of them during their probationary period, I screwed up. I picked the wrong person. No. If you get rid of people during the probationary period, and I know Chief has done this, and I think it's smart to do this, you are upholding a culture of actual, selection, right? Your culture is the weakest link you'll tolerate, right? That's really what your culture is what you will tolerate. And being willing, being empowered as a manager to say, we picked this person, we've trained this person, they're not getting it, we need to get rid of them. Because I will tell you this, every employee I've fired, especially on the police side, Chief, I think you'll back me up on this, if you go back, they're probably a bad probationary employee that we made a compromise on. We thought we could coach them up. That's not 100% true, but there's a huge correlation. Having the culture to be able to say, we didn't pick the right person, we got rid of them, we're going to hire again, or having a hiring list and saying, none of these fit, we're going to hire, we're going to do it all over again, says that your job is valuable. We're not just going to stick somebody in there and hope that it works out. Next slide. I think that, again, as I said, middle managers are the biggest influencers, right? One of the things that I care deeply about is not only supporting the chief and the manager, but also supporting the people below them that do well. And I'll explain why. Next slide. If you think about it, right, the new manager, new foreman, doesn't know the objectives of top management. They're not part of the workforce, but they're part, they have to get accepted by them. They used to be one of the guys, right? They were asleep in the truck, 5 years ago. And now when they say, hey, don't sleep in the truck, somebody says, well, 5 years ago, you did the same thing. You're a giant hypocrite. Well, that's kind of the deal, right? You take the leadership job, you've got to be willing to hold people accountable that were your friends. You're the first line of management, but you can't fire. You can't suspend. All you can do is recommend, right? You're not at borough council meetings necessarily. And, there's precedents in company culture and past practice and things like this. And so who has to be afraid of you, right? Because there's another level on top of you and top of you. So kind of working with those managers, developing a culture where they understand the job, they understand the job description. It takes time. It's not magical. But I think I wanted to explain to you guys, one of the issues we have with accountability is it starts with people willing to hold their fellow employees accountable. And it starts by letting them know what the job is, what the management job is, what the job description is. And that takes time. I know the chief does this. I know Michelle does it, but it takes a lot of time to nurture that and people are going to make mistakes. Next slide, if you will, as managers when they do that. The new manager established they got to make decisions about standards. They're supposed to coach people up, but they need a lot of record keeping time. You're kind of in the middle between two different kind of circumstances. And so there are a lot of challenges to new managers and accountability. Next slide, if you will. One, I think you look at empowering middle managers. You really try and work with them, and you make them accountable to manage. I will tell you this. A lot of times in the public sector, there's not evaluations of people's a job over the year, right? How they're performing. One, because unions reject that or don't want to be part of that. They don't have to be necessarily. But also, two, because a lot of times in the public sector, just for the reason I identified in the beginning, what's the math on that? What's the basis for that? The number of hours you work, number of overtime you work, your job satisfaction. How do you know how to do this? Well, it's like anything else. You're going to stink at it at first, and then you're going to get better. It's not that tough. You take the job description, you take the 10 essential functions, you rank them 1 to 5 in the first year. In the first year, your evaluation is going to be pretty stinky. The next year, it's going to be better. The next year, it's going to be better than that. You want happy employees? You tell them when they're doing well, and you tell them honestly when they're doing badly. You pretend to ignore them. You don't do evaluations. You have a culture of, well, no one told me anything, so I'm just going to keep doing the job that I want to do. Now, a lot of managers, middle managers, new managers don't want to do those evaluations. Well, that's what you get the money for. That's your job. I think that you have to, again, engage your managers, and I know that we do at the borough, but we're going to continue to do that because you get good feedback from that. But you have to start with the idea of you're not just there to tell people, here are the jobs today. It's here are the jobs today. Here's who's doing well and here's who's not doing well. If you're a new manager and in the first 6 months, you don't know who's slacking work, who's taking off too much, who's not doing it. A lot of times, what I hear is somebody will say, this is the worst employee we've ever had. They're terrible. They've never been any good. Okay, let's look at their personnel file. Thanks for the bike rodeo. Meets expectations. And the reason is that bad employee, one discussion with them is 40 minutes of agony and argument and discussion. And so it's just easier to not until you get sick of it. And then you're like De Niro in The Untouchables, when he plays Al Capone, he's walking around with a bat saying, I want him dead. I want his family dead. You know, we're not magicians.
So what does that look like, though, from us in this room? So from what I'm hearing, you're saying a lot of this is empowering the manager level to review the staff. So how do we, in this room, fit into the equation better in that layer of accountability? And do we get reports on those, again, job descriptions? Are we just monitoring the job descriptions? What sort of information should we be receiving to make this process?
Well, I think what I'm trying to illustrate is what I'll get to in a second.
I'm jumping
Is
the
that,
gun, sorry.
no, I'm glad you're asking these great questions. The difference between the public sector and the private sector is this. In the private sector, very few employees are unionized. No employees have statutory rights like civil service. That creates something known as due process, which I'll get to in a second. And it means that if you come from the private sector, you're used to at-will employees who can be terminated for any reason at all, as long as that reason's not illegal, because of age, because of disability, because of gender, because of race, because of religious view, because of sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which gives private sector employers a lot of ability to change course, to change the payday without talking to anybody, to change the rate of pay, to change anything, or to terminate someone. In the public sector, we don't have that. And because of that, we have a higher need for engagement and for a record of someone's performance, because we have to demonstrate that they are not performing their job with actual facts instead of emotions. And so from your perspective, you need to understand the difference, which is sometimes difficult unless you've been in the job for a while, because it seems crazy. Because I live my life in this world, and in the public sector world, it's a lot more regulated. And there's a lot more oversight from arbitrators, from the courts. And by the way, when we fire somebody, it can show up in the paper. When private sector company fires somebody, it's Tuesday, right? I mean, it's not a matter of public concern or public issues. So one is understanding the process and the challenges that managers have. Two is understanding the level of engagement that you need to have with HR or support with HR, because again, having a clean process, which doesn't mean a perfect process, and it doesn't mean that people are happy, but having clear communication, clear evaluation, and clear accountability makes everyone doing the same job, which makes everyone ultimately happier about their job. They may not love their job because it's a job, but they understand what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and there are no favorites. No one's treated differently. Everyone has to attend the job, and so on and so forth. And that's tricky to hit all of those things. Next slide, please.
But
That would be a best practice in the private sector too.
Yeah, sure, but I want to illustrate again the extra gear that the public sector has when I get to the discipline part of it, which is the due process part of it, which requires, I would argue, a lot more evidence than maybe in the private sector you're normally used to. Or let's put it this way, in order for us to be successful routinely, we have to have more evidence in the public sector, I would say generally.
So in your example, that 40-minute conversation that's uncomfortable every second that we're having it with that struggle employee, you know, the fact that you have a struggle employee is no reason to not have the conversation. I can appreciate those are uncomfortable conversations. And what we're looking to do, is that a conversation from council? Is that a conversation from manager? Is that a conversation from whatever we deem our HR? And then what information would we as council expect to see from that?
I think it's a conversation between the manager, the chief, your HR function, and the managers below them and the staff. I think it's a culture of explaining the job, holding people accountable to the job, and holding people accountable. I think that if you understand the process as counsel, you'll know why you have to invest the money in training. You'll know why it takes a little bit longer in the public sector than it does in the private sector. And you'll understand that there is not the easiest answer all the time. We saw this employee do X, Y, Z. Why can't we fire him right now? That's a conversation I hear a lot, right? Especially when they do something publicly embarrassing. And the answer is, it depends on a lot of different factors that I'm about to go into. So there's at the council level, other than understanding the process, requiring your managers to engage in a forward-facing process with their managers, investing the time, doing the job descriptions, having the personnel committee address those issues, just even if you have a checklist of things that ought to be looked at, that's the best role for council. And to understand that, especially in the public sector, because of the procedural safeguards, it's not always easy to get from point A, employee does something wrong, to point B, they're fired, as quickly as you would in the private sector. It takes a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more documentation, and there's progressive discipline. Now, John's absolutely right. That's true in the private sector as well, but it's kind of doubly true in the public sector when an arbitrator reviews what you do, when a court reviews what you do, when civil service reviews what you do. Those procedural protections make the timeline sometimes a little bit longer. And because it's public dollars and because it's public facing, you want to get it right every time. Whereas in the private sector, it's important, but not as perhaps complicated, if that makes any sense. Okay, next slide. Let's go to the next slide. Again, that was funny this morning when I was writing this. So there are two kinds of employees I just related. Just cause employees and at-will employees. At-will employees are people who do not have a statutory basis to continue in employment. That's somebody who has civil service, for instance, okay? Or has a contract that is a collective bargaining agreement. Those are just cause employees. At-will employees is everybody else. Anybody who does not have a contract, does not have a statutory basis, they are at will. They can be terminated. Their terms and conditions of employment can be changed at any time for any or no reason, with or without prior notice, so on and so forth. You could change the employee manual tomorrow and say, we're not paying for vacation that you've had for 20 years. And if you do that, that is your right. I would check your brake lines because you just cost people money. But you have the right to do that for at-will employees, so long as your reason is not motivated by age, by race, or by something that's illegal. Now, that's the law. If you came to an employment lawyer and you said, I'm firing this person, they're at will, and I said, why? And you said, because I can, I would say, you got to do better. Even though that's the law, that everyone's going to assume it's because they're over 40. Everyone's going to assume it's because they're a person of color or something, right? Just cause employees, they have what's known as continued expectation of employment. What that means is they have the right to expect they will be employed tomorrow and the next day, and they have due process rights because they are employees in the public sector, meaning that, the 14th Amendment applies to them. They have certain due process rights. Next slide, if you will. That's because their right to be continued employment that's guaranteed by statute or guaranteed by a collective bargaining agreement is what's known as a property right. If you violate that right, they can go to federal court and get back pay, front pay, damages, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. So for people who are just cause employees, this is the test. Now, this is a test that I use in my own life at my law firm just to make sure I'm doing things right. It's notice of a reasonable rule and order. There's an investigation which is fair. There's proof. There's equal treatment, and the penalty fits the crime. Let me explain a couple things. Number one, notice. That is the biggest problem that management has. Management says you violated this rule, and no matter how good the employee is. If they're about to lose their job, they're going to say, "But it's not the rule. We've never done it this way. My boss tells me I can do it different. I am the exception to the rule. Where is it? Oh, it's in the employee manual? You haven't updated that in 30 years. It's at the bottom of my locker. I've never looked at it." There's a corollary to that rule. The worst employee that you have is the one who's read all of the employee manual. And when you're wrong, they will say, "See this memo from 1975 that I happen to have a copy of? This, you've never revoked it." Notice is a management problem. You should be able to point to the job description, a Post-it note, a conversation, an email, whatever. But the arrogance we sometimes have is, this is the way we're supposed to do it. I know it, and you should do it the same way I do it. And I shouldn't have to tell you that. Now, there are some things you don't have to have noticed. You are not allowed to set your cubicle on fire. There is no rule that we have to have about cubicle flammability, right? Everyone knows. There's no rule that says you can punch a guy in the truck that you're sitting in, right? You can't do that. There are just some things that are first time, every time gets you fired. But everywhere else, I once had a guy last month who drove across wet concrete in a front loader. When he said, "Look what you just did." He said, "It wasn't me." Well, who else has a front loader around here, right? And here's the tracks in the wet concrete. But people will deny, make excuses, especially if they're in trouble. Reasonable rule and order. I have a case where I fired a kindergarten teacher. It's not my proudest moment. She was late by 2 minutes, which seems kind of draconian. She was late by 2 minutes 46 times in 3 months. And I know that because we have a swipe card. And 2 minutes, because the kids get dismissed from the lobby. You ever see kindergartners go from lobby to classroom? If you could bottle that energy, you could light this building. So if they're 2 minutes late, they're 2 minutes late the entire day, right? So that's a small rule, which shouldn't be a mortal sin. It's more of a venial sin. But if you do it 46 times, and we can make the connection for the arbitrator, in this particular case, that it's an important rule because you got to be in your classroom before these kids or they're unsafe. Notice of the rule, right? There has to be an investigation. A lot of times managers are like, they know what they did. I'm not talking to anybody. They're done. They're dead. Forget it. They're gone. That's never going to work, right? Especially where you have a review of your actions. There has to be an investigation. It has to be fair. They're very good here at doing that. That's not true everywhere. There has to be proof. This is my favorite part of this test. When someone gets in trouble, every adult within a 50-yard area becomes a fifth grader. And they will come to the manager and say, I don't want to be involved, but here are the 6 other things that person has done. But, to keep my name out of it. And you think to yourself, oh, I saw them do this, and this person told me about the 6 other things they did. And that's where the doctrine, the legal doctrine of well actually comes in. Because when you go to court 6 months later, that person who ran to you to tell on the other employee will well actually you to death on the stand. It was, well, actually, I'm not sure I said that. I'm not sure that's what I meant. So you actually have to have proof. You have to lock that story in because people's memories are bad. People see somebody at the Giant for the last 6 months. He still doesn't have a job. And gosh, I feel kind of bad that I ran in and told on him, and so on and so forth. One of the things that makes people crazy is equal treatment and the penalty fits of crime. When you have a due process employee, unless the rule is absolutely clear, if for the last 10 years, if you fall asleep in your lunch period, you get a 3-day suspension. Unless you tell everybody that the next person gets fired, everyone else that only got a 3-day suspension is going to be the measuring stick. You do not have the ability to just change course tomorrow. You say, well, I'm the new sheriff in town and I want to hold people more accountable. That's fine as long as you tell them. A lot of times we are reactive, right? We get mad, we want them gone, they've been a pain in our tuchus, we want them out of here. Equal treatment matters. The worst case I ever heard of is a Supreme Court case where a 25-year trooper took his revolver out, took all the bullets out but 2, and played Russian roulette with his girlfriend after he was drunk. Supreme Court said, look, he's had a 30-year history of good behavior. He's had emeritus conduct medals. He doesn't seem like he would, actually, it's not the Supreme Court. The arbitrator said, it doesn't seem like he does this all the time. So I'm going to put him back to work. The Supreme Court said, look, this is stupid. I don't agree with it, but the standard of appeal is so narrow, so when I come to you and say, look, this is a tough case. Well, this is ridiculous. He should be terminated. He's been a good employee until this. That's a consideration whether you like it or not. That is a reality in terms of accountability, unless you have other, possible priors. That's why when someone comes to us and says, this is the worst employee I've ever worked with, and I've been a manager for 15 years with this employee, and I see nothing in their file, that's bad managing, right? You're asking us to, I can put you up on the stand. Do you know what juries are going to believe or what an arbitrator is going to believe? Paper. I don't care if it's a Post-it note with a coffee stain. This time I talked to this employee that's 10 years old. That's evidence that I did something at that time to hold that person accountable. But too many times it's just easier to be mad and say, get rid of this person, disappear them, send them to Kabuki or wherever. It just doesn't work like that. And then the penalty has to fit the crime. What courts will look for, what arbitrators will look for is one of two things. Either first time, every time gets you fired, theft, fighting, setting your cubicle on fire, or progressive discipline. Did this, got written up, got suspended, got terminated, right? And of course, remember, when we're talking about employees, everyone kind of assumes you start here and you just go up in an increasing wave of excellence, right? That's not the way life works. People get divorced. People have health scares. Their employment goes well, and then it kind of squiggly lines, and it goes up again, right? Or it plateaus. And that's who you're managing. They may have been a great employee from here to here, and a lousy employee from here to here, but our documentation isn't clear. That's why when we sit down and talk about employees, it's not just what they did, it's what they've done. It's not just what they did, it's how we've managed them. And the more time we invest, in holding people accountable over time, the better and the quicker you can get to either corrective behavior, which is good, right? It's not here to punish, or terminal behavior because you have a good record, right? When somebody resigns, that's a win, right? When somebody quits and we give them next month's health care, which we've already paid for, that's a W. Take the dub, right? Go on, because they are no longer our problem. And of course, if we did anything like that, we'd get a release, and that release would mean that we could close the book on that. That's a cost of doing business. Next slide. If you're a unionized employee, you have a right to a fellow bargaining unit member. If you're going to get in trouble for what you say, if you are a unionized employee or statutory employee and you do something illegal, you are required by the law to tell us what you did that was illegal. We just can't turn it over to the DA. So you can't simply say, I have a Fifth Amendment right not to tell you that I was dealing drugs at work. An at-will employee doesn't have any of those protections. And if you're going to lose money, if you're going to be suspended, demoted, or terminated, you get a Loudermill notice. Sometimes it's a Loudermill meeting. I prefer a written notice because I don't want any mistakes about what we said to you, because people don't tell the truth. Notice what you did, what rules you violated, tell me why I shouldn't punish you. I would submit to you that I do that in the private sector, even when it's not required, because it's a good idea of knowing how your case is wrong. I would rather have somebody tell me, you have gotten it all wrong, I wasn't even here that day. It's just a check on what we do. Next slide. And here's what an arbitrator, a court, the PHRC, the EEOC will ask. Is it first time every time? Or is it progressive discipline? Is it correctable? Is it because lack of training? Is it negligent or deliberate? And is the employment relation salvageable? What I want you to understand as counsel, because when we come to you with discipline cases, they're difficult to figure out unless you understand this background. When we're talking about terminating people, the person that we know is not the person who shows up in front of the arbitrator. The person who spends their time loafing, who's behind a newspaper, who's just resting their eyes, who does half the job instead of all the job, who communicates through grunts, I can go on, right? Is not the person who shows up in the arbitrator. They show up in the arbitrator, they have a suit on, they have a tie on, they have shaved, they answer in full sentences. What the arbitrator sees is the person that's in front of them. Where we make a mistake as management is we can choose the time and place to engage that person. We decide when we hold somebody accountable. If we do it on a lousy record, that's an us problem. That's because we haven't done the groundwork necessary to do this. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just, but that's the choice that this council is always making. Do we have the record? Have we done the right things? Are we meeting those standards every time? And it is an inexact science. And even when we do all those things right, we're talking about an arbitrator hired by both sides, right? Whose job it is to continue to be employed, not a judge. Most of the cases end up in front of an arbitrator or even the EEOC. What I want to do is be able to cross-examine someone and say, look, you've been evaluated, you were written up, here's your performance improvement plan, you were suspended, and you were terminated. How many times, how many strikes? That's 5 strikes. Usually you get 3, right? So, but what I need you to understand as members of council is what I thought was helpful, and I think what Michelle thought was helpful, was to explain this process and explain what we're looking for, because it comes from 2 places. One, good management practices, and that data then is fit into that formula because those are the choices you have to make. Next slide. I'm just about done. So thank you. Termination after a reasonable period of progressive discipline. If it's willful misconduct, I know I was told, I did it anyways. Sleeping, theft, or fighting, and all that kind of stuff are repeated violations. Next slide. And look, I said this before. For me, the issue is the person who is not performing either gets better or leaves. If they leave because they resign instead of being terminated, I'm not God, right? The majesty of firing somebody works only for this current president. For everyone else, it's about deciding whether or not this person can be part of it. And if letting them resign instead of terminating gets them out the door, fine. If giving them a neutral letter of reference, they worked here from this date to this date, this was their final salary, we don't say anything else about them, gets them out the door voluntarily, I can usually recommend it. There are people that need to be fired. Let's be clear about this. But I believe that there are other ways to get to kind of Mecca, right? So again, if we pay ahead a month for healthcare and they get the rest of March for healthcare, which we've already paid for, great. You're playing with house money. If they sign a release and they go, what do you care? You're going to spend that money anyways, right? So those are all of the things that are tools in our toolbox. And I'm not suggesting we use them all the time, but they are there and you have to view them in their proper context, which is they are a tool to get you where you want to be, which is less risk and employee who is subpar out the door. And I think that's, okay, next. I stole this from Peggy Lee. How are you going to provide support to managers? How do we differentiate who's better than better managers? Can your managers make a mistake, right? Can you pick the wrong person, fire them as a probation officer, and not be considered bad at picking people? Because, look, the Cleveland Browns exist for a reason, right? They do bad evaluations. A Steelers fan. Do we offer mentoring or training? Are we connecting the dots, kind of personnel-wise? What's the incentive for managers doing well? Who asked for their input? What benefit did they get? Other than being the foreman, did they get anything else, right? Those are things that I think you have to invest in. Next slide. Do they know when and where they can solve a problem? Are they taught to resolve conflict? And what's wrong with the set of trainings for all managers? I think people should be forced to listen to me, but my daughters don't, so I've only got one place to go to. But the point that I'm trying to make, I think inartfully, is it's all connected. Good management gets good accountability. Good accountability starts with data. Data from people who are willing to collect the right data for the right reasons that fits within the formula. All I'm saying is that in the public sector, hiring and holding people accountable is complicated, right? It's not easy because you're not dealing with machines, you're dealing with people and variables you can't always control. And that, I'm afraid, is the end of my little soliloquy. And I'm sorry, I probably went over, but I'm trying to take 30 years of what I do and keep it into 25 minutes.
If I may, I would like to comment that having been on council for 4 years, what I have seen is that management is doing a much better job in all of these areas. Management is holding people accountable. Management is telling people earlier that they're screwing up. Management is coming to us where we have discipline with a record of having documented that and having tried to work with the employee. So I mean, I don't take this as you're telling us, these are our problems. I take this as you're giving us context. So when they coming through the system, we have a better way of looking at it. I think the only way where I'm seeing the biggest shortfall on our part is not routinely looking at the job descriptions. I don't see that we're looking on a schedule to look at everything every 3 years to make sure, for example, when we're talking about what equipment they're using or what software they're using, that's up to date. But other than that, it seems to me you're never perfect, but we're getting much better, particularly the chief and Michelle.
Can I just affirm that? I think the chief and Michelle both are very good at seeing the problem before it happens, identifying what we need to do constructively. I think the chief especially is very good at documenting things and, having a good record. What I'm suggesting is that council's role as policymakers is to make sure that that is institutionalized and not just because they're really good employees, right? Because the next person that holds that job may be good-ish at it, but are they getting better, right? That's a lot of experience in managing people that you're seeing in those two places and a lot of judgment. And I agree with everything you said. I think I said it a couple times during the speech, they do a good job doing this. So this is not a criticism of this borough. This is an explanation of the process and the why of what we do, which is a little different than, again, what I see with my public or private sector clients. I think that's actually right, but I do think it has to be institutionalized. I think succession in the public sector is really tough, right? I think finding the right person to be a manager is really tough, and making sure they have the right set of skills, all of the things that I talked about, is really difficult because there are competing pressures every day to deal with the water pipe instead of people or training or whatever. And I will tell you that the more you can groom what these two have, the better off you're going to get. But the hope would be that the next person that comes after, either these two people and the people after them, would have the same level of appreciation. Now, that's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. But I agree with you there.
Just so the committee's aware, I had Mike come in about a year ago to give a presentation to all of the department heads that manage and are responsible for performance reviews and discipline of staff, to kind of explain best practices for disciplinary processes, writing people up, having one-on-one conversations about performance. We also had the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance come in about 3 years ago, 2 years back to back, and did what we're calling middle management in-house supervisor training. So the captains in the fire department, the leads in the public works department, and the sergeants in the police department all got training here specific to that mid-level supervisor role. I want to say it was over the course of 8 weeks each year that we did it, which they all seem to find very beneficial.
Do you have, I guess, a recommendation as to, I feel like the issues that would be documented by managers are going to be so varied. Is there a way that in an effort to just provide oversight, we can somehow identify when it's reasonable for us to be looped in. A lot of this is like, I know that Michelle is overseeing the people under her. I know that Chief Phillips is doing that as well. I feel confident they'll come to me when they identify an issue, but in the event that they were to be somebody else, like, how can you say this is the threshold where, like, we need to be aware so that we can make sure documentation is appropriate, that sort of thing?
Generally, my threshold, when council gets involved, I think that broadly speaking, I think there has to be an ongoing conversation about who's doing well and who's not doing well, kind of generally, right? There are people who are continual disciplinary issues that I think briefing and executive session makes sense for. I think that when they lose money, suspended, demoted, termination, obviously, you need to be as involved as possible. That's kind of the magic line for me. That's when you really get involved. At the low level of discipline, any good manager is going to say, well, look, I've got 20% of the people who are doing great, 20% of the people who are really not doing well, and then I've got everybody in between, right? Who are kind of doing the job. What I would love to have a manager do, and this is also on me, managing lawyers and secretaries, I've got to be aware of who's starting to slip, who's not attending, right? Who's going through a divorce and having a hard time getting here on Monday, who's got other issues, because I need to get there before it becomes nuclear, right? And to me, that's a thing that managers ought to be talking about to some degree, to the extent that they can. A good manager should instinctually kind of see what's going on without bias. One of the biggest things I hear in the public sector is there are 5 people and the foreman was best buddies with this guy, so this guy can take the 15 minutes extra for lunch or come in a little bit late. That starts to destroy, you know, what you've got. And so that's one of the things I'm talking about, training and talking about those kind of issues, because it really affects everything. Just getting people to attend. A lot of times managers have a hard time dealing with people who have medical conditions or psychological conditions that affect their ability to attend. That's an issue, right? And providing that support is important. So I guess that's my line, is the really serious stuff, but I think these two and their staff do a pretty good job of identifying issues that are coming up. And that's, if I'm hearing that, I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
Are there times when we can't have information because we are going to sit as a judge and jury?
Unless you're on civil service, not really. There's no kind of conflict of interest about knowing about something before you, because you're not really an appeal board, right? Even if you hear a grievance later, because you're part of the grievance step, you're still making the decision ahead of time. So there's no line S problem where you're conflicting your roles or authorities. The one exception is if you're on council and you're also on civil service, you can't make a decision to terminate somebody and then sit on that appeal in civil service, which,
And nobody on council is on civil service.
Currently, it has happened in the past.
other than that, no, there's no issue with that. The only thing that I would say is I have had situations where newly elected members have wanted to look at personnel files, and that is actually, there's a case on that you can't unless all of council agrees to do that. It's not the right of one person to do that. It's a collective decision. So, involving the borough of Bangor and Northampton County, which is always an interesting place. So, if you've been to Bangor, you know.
I'll bet Exeter trumps it.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else? I'm sorry I've talked to you all, but this is what I do for a living. And I'm pleased to do it for the borough.
Do you have this presentation that you can send it to?
Sure.
That would be great.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just glad that somebody would take it.
Heidi Masano introducing myself. Thank you. This was great.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably where I get gonged off stage, which you should do, or the hook, or whatever you guys do, because you have other business to do. So unless you need me.
I'll circle back to you later this week.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for your
much.
time.
Right, see you. Take care.
Guess that's on to me. Move us along, sorry. For the ride. All right, so we're gonna go on to discussing the hiring process for the fire chief position.
So the application period closed on the 13th, Friday the 13th. We had a total of 25 applicants. 3 came in after the deadline, so they were automatically DQ'd as they were late. Whittled the remaining 22 down to 5 that not only could follow directions as to what we were asking for and to be submitted, but also had the qualifications that we were looking for. I had tentatively set up March 10th as the round 1 interview with the outside panel of fire chiefs. 3 of the 5 candidates, 2 are out of state for training that week. 1 is out of the country for vacation. So at this point, I'm looking at the week of the 23rd or the 30th because I also have availability conflicts with the chiefs that are doing the interviews. So I may be requesting a special council meeting later in April solely for the purpose of hiring, depending how that process goes. Something I think this committee needs to also start thinking about sooner than later is typically, when we did this before, the interview panel for the round 2 was the chair of personnel and the council president. That would solely be you, Kristen, as well as myself. So we would need at least a second person to sit on those round 2 interviews. So, up to the table. Absolutely.
Good afternoon, everybody. As we know, we're calling it director of finance position is open and vacant right now and did not really yield, in our opinion, qualified candidates. And so we want to find a solution that does a few things, one of which it falls within our budget parameters. The second thing we want to do is combine our resources so that we can build a modernized finance department. And we also want to spread the risk of employee turnover, et cetera, across different avenues. So option 1, and I'll go into a little more detail than what we just have on the screen here. This is what we have been moving towards. And this is one option that's on the table today. And this is where we would try to get a full-time director of finance, 1 position, which would be a more of a 1-to-1 replacement for Phyllis than than the other options as well. So our main pro here is a single point of contact, on-site presence, 40 hours a week of expected work. The main cons that we've seen already in our recruitment process have to do with our market for director of finance being tight. We haven't really seen good candidates come out of this as well, and you all are aware of that. One of the ideas we had was to raise the range for this, which we may do, given your decision today on this as well. Another area where we have is some issues are a single point of failure, and some of the things you guys need to know about is that Phyllis would be on vacation even, and people would be calling for payroll questions, which isn't good. If you take if you have a family trip, and that happens to be on a payroll week, and you can't take off for that, that's not good as well. So, this is what we want to have is more coverage for the same role for different people within the department. So our honest assessment of this is that this is the more traditional approach, but it's also, I think, the highest risk option for the borough's needs and purposes right now. So we wanted to give you guys a few other options. And so we're going to talk first about the senior accountant option. The reason we're calling it senior accountant, it might not need to be, oh, yes,
Before you
yes.
move on to option 2.
Yeah.
Option 1, you're saying cost is 175 to 190. Is that
Yep.
including insurance and pension
Yes,
and
it is.
salary?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep, insurance and pension. And you're getting someone who probably would have between 2 and 4 weeks of vacation and sick time in there as well. So when you look at the full cost, you're not looking at a full 52 weeks of work a year.
as well. So just keep that piece in mind. Our health insurance for the family plan is ballpark 50 grand employee. So when we add any of these numbers, our range, when I say the total all-in cost, that's definitely included there. Our defined contribution plan is 10% of the salary. So if we're at 100 for the, director position, it's 110 plus 50 plus, depending on where we need to. You might get a candidate, and the reason I put 175 to 190 is you might get a candidate that comes in with considerable experience who would say, well, I'm at 115 where I'm at right now. Is there any way we can go to, and you may want a little wiggle room for negotiation there.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions on that first section? Okay. So I called this senior accountant because you don't want a staff accountant here necessarily, which is like our entry level position. Senior accountant, you want somebody with at least 3 years, I would think, of experience. And we can flesh this out with a job description easily in a day or two, depending on what the decision is. And this combination is a hybrid approach of where my company, Transcend Finance, would offer CFO advisory services on a monthly subscription retainer, sort of a fixed fee per month, which would get us around the same range as the previous hire or the previous option, option one, where you would have someone on site day to day handling finance operations, payroll, et cetera. And you would have Transcend Finance handling board communication, financial reporting, those sort of strategic initiatives that we want to modernize the finance department, which would include automated payment systems, automated accounts payable, et cetera, that we just need to just move that way anyway. So we would include those in there, and that would all have to be worked out in an agreement. But this from a pros standpoint, we have, you're not exactly asking one person to be the expert today when they may not be in a new hire.
Sorry. Considering what you said about the cost of benefits,
Yes.
how can this possibly be as little as 175 a year?
So the cost of benefits would be, if we were to go with 60 plus 55, that would put you at 110. Oh, my math's a little off there. We would come down on that 90 a year amount.
But I mean, is 175 realistic, or are you looking at a cost of 200? When we're looking at the options, we need to know the cost.
Yeah, I will say depending on what the scope is, that you would be between 175 and 200. We'll just throw it. I'll give you that answer today, depending on what what it would look like. So some of the pros here include distributed expertise. You wouldn't be asking a 3-year experienced person to do everything within the department. But you would still have someone here day to day who would be able to learn, who would be able to grow, who would be able to understand the job, hopefully over time. And there may be a point at which after a year or two, it may be prudent to determine, oh, this person is getting things, they're understanding things. Maybe the relationship with Transcend looks different, or another firm looks different at that time. So that's some of the areas. You also have, my firm also has 70 years of combined director of finance level experience. So I'm not the only person who would be helping out with this. We have a team of people as well. So that's one of the big things there. There would be built-in continuous improvement and automation areas. So we've identified a few areas where there's improvement that can occur, and I've mentioned several of those areas. One is accounts payable. There's some major things we could do to really make things more efficient.
Okay, and in option 2, there's no change in how we do personnel.
How do you mean?
Well, the next option,
Yes.
in contrast to the next.
Oh, in context, yes, that's correct. Yes, you are correct. Yep, there's no change in current borough personnel. It would just be adding another body and having a supplemental service from us or another firm, whatever you need. The third option, and we'll go over this briefly. This is an area where we tried to think the level of difficulty that we thought it would take to get someone with the title accountant in the door versus someone with payroll HR experience. There may be more payroll HR employees out there. We also identified that we have Melissa here at the borough some of her job encompasses HR responsibilities, some of Phyllis's job encompasses HR responsibilities, some of Kathy's job and some of Michelle's job all encompass HR responsibilities. We need a single point there. That's, in my opinion, a huge risk for the borough. So this was more of a creative solution that we came up with that would say, hey, why don't we, instead of hiring someone specifically with accountant in their title, what if we hire someone who would help the finance department out, provide payroll support and a lot of the backup with the benefits, which was a big portion of Phyllis's job. Why don't we get somebody in the door that would do that? And so that's this option here as well.
I would think in option 3, you have to take on more of the financial responsibilities that the employee in option 2 was doing. So I don't understand how you can charge the same price, or what's going to happen to the duties that the senior accountant was doing.
Why it would be different is what you're asking.
No, what happened to those duties, because they don't seem to be, anybody doesn't seem to be responsible for those duties in option 3. And I'm assuming you're not being responsible for it because your price isn't increasing.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to do the HR piece.
Well, but who's going to do the accounting responsibilities, which were in option 2?
That person would also do those accounting responsibilities.
I don't see that as listed.
Okay, we can,
No.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what's the difference between the senior accountant and the payroll HR specialist? How much more is a senior accountant taking on that's taking work away from you?
oh, I see what you mean. So it would get us out of the space of the HR benefits piece. So instead of having us, right now, we're reviewing payroll as an example. We're reviewing payroll. We operate as the backup in the department. That payroll HR person would also operate as that backup. However, that person would be distinct from the senior accountant level individual because they would also be the HR point of contact in the building. Right now, we don't currently have that. So one area that this could potentially be at risk is HIPAA information. When it comes to HIPAA, we need one person that's going to have that info. And that has to be secure, that has to be confidential, there's penalties, et cetera. If that information is going to multiple different people, that's not a good thing. That cost accountant person, that senior accountant level person wouldn't necessarily have access to the payroll, the HIPAA compliant payroll portion of things, if that makes sense.
So the on-site payroll HR specialist is doing everything the senior accountant is doing, plus HR?
Yes. But what I will say, we're currently in the department, we're already doing a lot of HR responsibilities.
So we're just framing it more with an
We're just framing
HR and payroll.
And I'll say it's also might be more difficult to find an accountant with a job search than it would be a.
Yeah.
So that's the words might be more of the difference.
So I think what jumps out to me is existing staff handles light reporting functions. So to me, I guess ideally this would take the HR that's kind of scattered everywhere, put it in a centralized location, which would then potentially shift the responsibility from those who are doing those HR things would then be doing potentially
Better finance functions, yes. Better finance functions, more finance functions, those sorts of things. And we can flesh this out in much more detail. Like this is not limited to what this entire solution going forward may look like is not limited to the bullet points on the screen.
Michelle, do you have a recommendation?
I personally like a payroll HR specialist because I do think it takes those pieces that multiple people are doing, puts them in one place. You also still have the outside, very high level experience for finance as a whole, and another person here for the day to day. And I don't think, unless you said it when I left the room, all of these options include keeping the current part-time person on.
Keeping Kathy on.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
She does a lot of HR.
She does a lot.
Things, right? 'Cause I know
All the
she's
onboarding.
involved with like the
Yes.
summer employees. So
So what would she
potentially, like, if we're automating a lot of this reporting and things like that, that could be something, if she's willing, that potentially could be taken on.
So keep in mind, she's only doing that during, I'm gonna say.
I guess, yeah, that's true. The rest of the year.
But she's doing all of AP, AR. She's doing payroll. She has plenty to, if anything, we're at the point, I'm worried about her going
Retirement.
over.
Oh.
I was gonna say
I'm
her
worried about
hours.
that too.
Yeah. I'm worried about, like, we are constantly keeping an eye on, do not get too close to
Yes.
30 hours.
So if we're lifting all these HR responsibilities off of everyone in-house and moving it to the single point person who's also doing finance, that opens up several hours for many of you. Possibly if you're spending hours, I don't know how many hours each person throughout the building is spending in HR. Is this HR person still gonna have enough time to do all of the finance that they need? And where are we looking at long-term? Are we keeping, a consultant on indefinitely? Or is this something where this HR person could end up becoming the director and we bring in another HR person? I'm just kind of thinking long-term here.
I mean,
I know there's a short, I know you guys think, we gotta get somebody in the door, but
I go back to a conversation that we had a week or two ago. Phyllis's position was never a 40-hour week position. It was a 60-hour week position. That she did it without complaining for as long as she did, kudos to her. But the reality is, when Kathy was hired, that probably should have been a full-time position, or we should have had 2 part-time positions and a full-time position. So I think the expectation moving forward needs to be, it is never going to be 1 full-time person and 1 part-time person.
yeah, I agree.
What council wants that to look like, I think, is also going to change as, again, just efficiency with accounts payable, with different things that will come down the pipeline in the future. I think this is something you're gonna have to reevaluate every 2 to 5 years. And what makes the most sense based off of what efficiencies are put in place in the next year, and then what could change in future years after that.
I think one of my takeaways is that the 60 hours potentially could be lessened with some automation and some reporting functions that we already have access to and just have to implement, or they need to be built, or they need to be.
Yeah, so here, this is what I want for the council. I don't want us to sacrifice meaningfulness for expediency. So I don't want us to, let's get somebody in the door in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks. Oh no, we rushed it. We didn't think it through. Oh, they're gone in 6 months. They're gone in a year. What I want for us is to consider what the future looks like for the finance department in its entirety. So there are areas like accounts payable, et cetera. Your budget process, there's areas for efficiency there. If you're not spending money on dollars, if you're not spending dollars on people and the human capital cost in your budget, there are systems. There is technology options that are incredibly helpful for local government when it comes to budgeting. And some of those things can be like, I can only think of so much and do so much in my current state right now, handling both the day-to-day and, while we're here, here's an efficiency. Hey, we can sort of implement this as we're getting into it. So some of those things would need to be done down the road or further on. We can't do it all in 1 year. If we're gonna blow it all up and fix it and build it back up again in 1 year, that's a lot to ask. Does that answer the question better?
Yeah.
Could help. I think it's hard for me to visualize without knowing what would be coming away from whom and who would be needing to take on what. I mean, I think option 3 is the best logical option to me. I think we need HR support, and I think we need to centralize that, and I think splitting up responsibilities so people sort of have more ownership and there's less, one point of contact, I think, make it better. I think it's just, I want to make sure, like, I also feel like the borough manager and the borough secretary need support as well. I'm just wondering how we can, yeah, I don't,
My confusion is, it looks like, although it's not described this way, 3 is 2 plus 3. You're talking about an HR person and a senior accountant combined. And I don't, if both of those are full-time jobs, how the heck do you combine them and have one full-time job? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So.
And can you
that-
find a person with both of those skill sets?
Yeah, to me, I just don't understand how that's a workload for one person, but maybe it's, I just don't get it. I mean, you might
That-
have it,
that
you
makes
might be able to
sense.
explain it to me, but that's how I.
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it
yeah.
as to-
I can understand that. One of the biggest pieces is that that person would still handle payroll. So the HR function is not in and of itself the whole entirety of the work. It's not a full-time job. So like if
So what is it, like an average of 2 hours a day?
I don't know.
A day?
It also depends what's going on.
Yeah.
Are we hiring a bunch of people at the same time? Do we need to update the employee handbook? Is it open enrollment season? Like, there are so many factors. It can be cyclical and seasonal.
Yeah, but if the accounting cycle collides with that.
It always has, though.
Yeah, but then how's, the point is that we're trying to make things better, and that doesn't seem like it's making things better.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Another option, and this could be termed as option 4, would be to go with a senior accountant level person in-house dedicated to the finance function. You could outsource HR. There are companies that do this for local government. They're excellent. There's a few people locally.
mhm.
I think one called Paragon is one of them. So that might fix some of the HR.
Or part-time HR.
Yeah, yep, that's also a possibility.
To me, you're putting too much in option 3, and to me, it makes sense.
Yeah,
Option 2 plus a part-time HR person, in-house, out-house, out. But I think there's too much work for either 2 or 3.
for a full-time person, we'd just be creating ourselves another 50, 60 hours.
Are we
Yeah, yeah.
gonna give up in 6 months?
I gotta go back to Janice's question. This says 175 to 190. 65 plus 90 is 155, plus 50,000 is 205.
Yeah, it's more like
Yeah,
180 to 220.
Yeah.
That's low blowing. Mr. Treasurer, do you have any comments?
Well, I go back to the basics. You said, just to make sure I understand, you say for per employee, it's $50,000 for healthcare?
Ballpark. Well, we have to, when we budget, we base it on the family plan. We can't assume, and you can't hire this way, that, oh, hey, we're going to hire single people only.
You have to
Yeah,
have an average,
yeah.
but you have to have a goal. I understand that, yeah. But
Yeah, that's what it is. And that may be,
Not gonna take, unless you hire someone who's traditionally single, nobody who's married or has kids or both isn't gonna be on this health
Oh,
insurance.
yeah, I'm not debating that.
It's that simple.
Making sure that 50,000 is valid.
It's not just somebody.
Yeah, yeah,
Whole other
And
problem.
you're saying 10,000 per person.
On the DC,
on the DC plan,
at a
it's
salary of
it's
100,000.
10%.
Yeah.
10% of
It's
his.
10% of whatever that salary would be.
No,
I
Yeah.
just wanna make sure that our basic.
Yeah.
I'm not debating.
Yeah.
Service, I hope.
Yes, 10% of the salary.
Uh, I do think the HR thing, again, I don't know enough of the detail of what Phyllis did. Did you spend a third of payroll, a third of HR, a third? I have no idea. And I think for us to make a decision, I think we should know that. You know, how much indeed, how much time did she spend on these different things? I don't know, I don't have any idea what Kathy does. I don't think she doesn't work full-time, does she?
No.
So, what does she do? Yeah, I think we have to know more information before we decide on 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or whatever. This is a pretty big step, no matter which way you go, obviously.
I think personally, I'd appreciate your massaging the options
Yes.
Mm.
I agree
and
with
then
that.
coming back next month.
It's a good
I agree
wordage.
with that. Yeah, this is the time to look at it, absolutely.
How many hours a month do you estimate you've been able to whittle away from working straight instead of Phyllis's way, which was meticulous and round,
Sure.
but not that way, and working straight from the program and this, that, and the other?
The biggest area, the primary one has been with the financial reporting piece.
Right.
Probably 20 to 30.
Hours a
Month.
month.
Decreased.
Yes,
Just the financial reporting,
for just the financial reporting.
20 hours, 20, 30 hours a week.
A month.
A month.
Basically, to get into details, in the past, Phyllis would take an Excel report out of Edmunds, and then she would use Excel formulas to update various different other reports, et cetera. It took a lot of finessing in that category. I built a Python script that's one click, and it formats to our chart of accounts. So,
So just to like clarify, but particularly, like your information is still as accurate. As
Yes,
Phyllis.
yeah,
It's
we-
just done in a different, it's curated in a different fashion.
the more of the time than one click we spend reviewing versus preparing.
Yes.
That's the key there.
And we're in agreement that payroll processing cannot be done out of house. Because it's
Yeah, no.
complicated.
No, I'll say no. The biggest portion of that is that if we were to outsource the payroll piece, we would be outsourcing the easiest part of payroll, which is entering the hours into the system. That's not where our struggle is. Our struggle is with the way that our union contracts and our payroll codes are structured and coded in a way that makes entering it into the payroll system less complicated. Our most automated payroll portion or process is with our summer help and summer employees. It's very simple, very easy. They sign in on an app or a computer, they click, I'm there, I leave, done.
It's my understanding there's a lot of manual time spent setting that up though, onboarding employees and putting them into that
The
system.
onboarding piece, I'm not talking about onboarding employees, I was talking about time tracking.
Oh, okay.
That may be
So, like,
much
that's like-
more, yes.
That's a.
That's, when it comes to time tracking, that's the easiest portion. Other municipalities, even around here, have automated time tracking for other employees that automatically take your hours from the time tracking system into the payroll system. We don't have that here.
So are there things that we need to do when we do the next round of collective bargaining
Good luck.
that can change some things to make?
There may, yeah,
Phyllis and I had this conversation since I became manager. With every contract that's negotiated, that each contract gets different on, I'm an FPO, I'm acting as captain, I'm working on a holiday. Those are 3 very separate things and 3 very separate contracts. That's never going to be aligned in all 3 contracts. But every single one of those 3 things requires extra attention to detail, both in the time of the person reviewing the timesheet to approve it, and then the person on the entry side that's doing the manual entry to key in, oh, okay, so for this pay period, you had this many hours where you did this, oh, and it was a holiday, but the holiday started at midnight and you only worked the first 8 hours of it, so you get paid at that. Like, it's just compounded constantly. And I don't know how you're gonna get away from that, because you'd have to convince all 3 bargaining units to effectively have the same contract with the same things, and good luck.
So is this problem unique to us, or is this kind of the same issue all municipalities are dealing with that have a bunch of?
You don't normally, we're unique that we have police, fire, and public
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Yes, I know there's not many that have 3, but
yeah, a lot of just 2, or they have 1 and it's only police. So some other places don't have a union for their public works. which makes it less complicated. So I wouldn't say there are others that I would say unique in the same factors that Wyomissing has, not unique from a general perspective. Like it takes the payroll coordinator at South Whitehall Township, which has 130 full-time employees, 6 hours to enter and process the entire payroll in one day. It takes us 2 days
With 2 people.
with 2 people. And some of that, I think, can be addressed in budget. Some of that can be addressed with certain things, with how our timekeeping tracks lines up with our union contracts. When I say in budget, I mean this is just my external viewpoint, and this may ruffle feathers. But when I saw there are 2 mowing codes that have a very small amount of money in the budget. One is for the library, one is for the borough. And I think historically, the accounting system had been asked to track certain information that really should just be tracked at the manager level or the department level, not in the accounting system. In my opinion, it should just be, oh, you should have public works, labor as one category. If there needs to be an allocation, we build that on the back end, not have 14 different public works labor codes. But the info that you all need to see from, well, how much time are we spending mowing the library? If that ever comes up, Greg knows the answer, Jim knows the answer already, which they already do. So I'll throw that one out there too.
Do other municipalities allocate the manager's salary that they do?
Yes.
Also, keep
Yeah.
in mind, my salary is split. I still do like codes. I'm still code enforcement. And I'm the backup zoning officer, commercial and residential. So my salary is actually split between general government and then also specific zoning and codes. And Phyllis and I, every year when she would do the budget, we'd talk about, is it still 70-30? Is it more 80-20? Is it 60-40? Just as things have shifted.
No way to streamline that, for example.
Yeah, that's.
You could do that for all employees, but you still have the issue with the police and the fire.
And you're also losing to some extent, I think, where is that money actually coming from? What is that person actually doing? And allocating your total cost for what is zoning and code enforcement.
But I don't think it needs to be as granular.
Yeah.
As it has
Required by municipal accounting, again, I'm not familiar at all. You know, this allocation stuff, this just blows my mind, that you're just making it so much more complex. I understand what you're trying to do, but is that required by municipal accounting?
I don't think it's required by municipal accounting, it's allowed. And that's, I think, where it benefits local governments. The flip side to this, Dave, is that we up the general fund millage rate for general real estate taxes, as opposed to having some of those costs be absorbed by the trash bill, some of those costs be absorbed by the water fund and the sewer fund. That's really the balancing act that a lot of local governments have to deal with, and we have to deal with it here. It's, it may not, the allocation has to be looked at, I think, because there are portions of people's jobs that pertain to the water department or the sewer department that do need to be representative in those areas as well. If we were to throw everything in general fund, I don't think that would be.
No, I'm not suggesting.
Yeah.
I know we want to revisit, but I want to try to give some guidance as far as what we'd like to see, so that you know. So I mean, personally, I would like to look at options if we were to outsource HR, just to see what that would look like. I don't know if it makes sense to split HR and payroll. If payroll has to stay internal, if maybe that's negligible, but I think it would be good to have that as a reference point. I think it would also be beneficial to somehow have a, rough estimate of where the responsibility, like the time being allotted to each, so is payroll gonna take this person X, is HR taking up this much time, just so that we would know we're piecing this role together,
Yeah.
what it's gonna look like percentage wise.
My opinion is I would love to find somebody that we can groom to eventually use your ability to make everything more streamlined.
Yes.
And, after a certain number of years, we'll take over more of that. You've been paid for that work. But you got to watch what you're paying these people, because you can't pay someone more than what their boss is getting paid. It's not a sales job.
And that's why we recommended more going down towards the senior accountant level in terms of a salary than a director level person.
If you have a senior level accountant, and then you bring on outside external HR and then have your hours, I need to see those numbers.
Yeah.
Be the right numbers, because that's.
I'd also ask that when you describe the current budget, you make it clear that 175 is not salary, because.
No, that's not the salary.
I understand that, but members of the public are going to look at that
Yes.
and
Yeah.
say, why are
Yeah, when
we
it says
paying somebody
175?
175?
Salary,
So if you would put
salary,
salary
pensions,
plus
benefits.
benefits,
Plus
that would
in cost.
be very
Yeah.
helpful to us.
Yep.
Well, fringe benefits are benefits.
Sorry if I got anybody in trouble with that.
Not yet, but it's, yeah, sure.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah, that was an item.
But then I'll tell you, I do it. I've been doing this for a long time, and not a long time, but when I saw we get the email, I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah, yeah.
Then I realized these include health insurance and everything else. When everybody finds out what the cost of the health insurance is, that's
No,
the next
it's-
heart attack.
And that may need to be shopped too. That's a question as well.
Everyone feels though,
Well, I just think we need an option 4. I don't
Yeah.
think 2 and 3 are really.
Yep.
So we're tabling this then.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to table.
So
do you feel you have enough guidance to move forward? Okay.
Yeah. If I have other questions, I'll reach out.
All right, so we have a motion, a second to table. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna preface the firefighters pension plan agenda item that I'm gonna be asking you to table action on this, only because Gerard is doing an additional actuarial analysis based off of follow-up conversation. So for today, I really just want to give you some backstory on how we got to where we're at and what the concerns are. In 2008, the defined benefit plan was put in place for the fire department. Of people that were employees at that time, there are only 3 left that are on that plan. In 2012, as part of negotiations of the collective bargaining agreement for the fire department at that time, they agreed to switch to a defined contribution plan, of which 9 employees are currently on. Section 5.B.4 of the defined contribution plan speaks to a disability pension. The defined benefit plan actually also has this language, which is concerning. Either way, whether if you're on defined benefit or defined contribution, if you were not here for 10 years and you were injured in the line of duty, meaning while working, that you were discharged with a disability, you get nothing. That's kind of the preface to what started this conversation. So in having that conversation a couple months ago with, at the time, union president, which for those of you that are not aware, Technician Lambert, sitting in the back of the room, is the current union president for the fire department. I invited him to attend this meeting because it's a public meeting and this is involving their pension plan. So we had a conversation a couple of months ago. If we're gonna visit this, I need to ask the pension administration company to look at different scenarios. So the scenarios that we came up with, scenario 1, normal retirement, stays age 65, completion of 25 years of service. Disability with immediate eligibility, benefit equal to 66 2/3, and it's service related only at the time of disability. And the fire department union members agreed if there was council approval at some point to switch to this, the members would contribute 1% in 27, 3% in 28, 5% in 29, similar to what the police department contributes to their pension plan. Scenario 2, eligibility age 60, completion of 20 years of service, everything else stays the same. Scenario 3, age 55, completion of 20 years of service, everything else stays the same. And then scenario 4 is eligibility at age 62 with a benefit equal to 2% of the average compensation multiplied by the years of service. So don't necessarily have to be here 25 years, but it maxes out at 25 years. Otherwise, disability and member contribution is the same. When I reviewed this with the fire department, 2 questions came up. Is it years of service or is it age that increases the overall contribution cost required by the borough? I flipped that question back to Gerard. I'm still waiting on an answer. I also asked them to look at 2 additional options, which would be age 55 and 25 years of service, again, mirroring what the police department has, or age 55 or 25 years of service, whichever comes first. I also asked them to look at additional member contributions, 2% the first year, 4% second year, 5% the third year, just so we have a more accurate picture. In terms of the cost analysis and the current 4 options, the difference for option 1, funding on the borough's end after member contributions are factored in, state aid is factored in, everything else is factored in. It would be an additional, for option 1, $40,612 contribution that first year. Option 2, it would be an additional $134,381 contribution that first year. Option 3, it's an additional $127,295 contribution the first year. And option 4, it would be an additional $111,676 that first year, which is taking this number and subtracting this number from it. So this is the current plan, and then these are scenarios minus, again, state aid, member contribution, everything else. So knowing that there's potentially some
That's
more.
moving everybody to defined benefit plan?
Correct, minus the 3 members that are already on it. So we're talking about the 9 people that are on the DC plan currently. And this would also change the defined benefit current members and the new members, that they would be eligible for a disability pension regardless of years of service. They don't have to be here 10 years to be vested and get that disability pension if something would happen. So knowing that there's 2 additional options, the actuary is going to look at and get back to me. No action needed for today. I simply wanted to make you aware again of the backstory. And
Is there, first of all, I have 2 questions. I mean, isn't this part of a collective, wouldn't this be part of the natural collective bargaining
yes, they're
conversation?
coming up for negotiation.
Understood. And then secondly, did we look at it to move everybody to a defined contribution plan and implement the same type of, I agree with the disability, I think that's bad. I agree with you. But the reality of it is, do we look at the defined contribution side of it to see if the dollars and cents would be there?
We can, but I can guarantee you the 3 that are grandfathered on the defined benefit are not going to want to switch, and everybody else is already on it.
Did we do this where we keep the same people and moving forward, same people on defined contribution and keep those 3 people on defined benefit?
And solely change the disability language.
Correct.
I mean, that would be an option no matter what, but keep in mind, if you're here for 2 years and you're on the defined contribution and you get disabled, you're walking away with maybe $5,000.
Isn't the trend to go to defined contribution plans and away from defined benefit plans?
Yes.
Yes, and I think that's a valid argument for most departments besides emergency responders, because we've had a line of duty death and we've had an employee with a workers' comp injury he's never coming
Is there an
back from.
insurance policy we can buy for disability policies?
I can ask that question.
The answer is yes. It's not easy, but you can do it.
Do you know the cost associated with it?
No, it's a lot. But it might not be that much. Because you could buy a standard disability policy, not a standard disability policy because they're firefighters, so it's not gonna be anywhere near standard. But is there a company out there that offers a disability policy for firefighters? And maybe it's only for firefighters in the first 10 years, I don't know.
That would get you over that bridge. Again, the biggest red flag that started the conversation is you're here for less than 2 years and you're injured in the line of doing your job, you walk away with nothing. And I didn't think anybody sitting at this table would be okay with that.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, but if you've got more options, I think looking at more options makes sense.
Especially if it's saving.
Yeah.
That's not dependent on whether it's contribution or benefits. It's more in the language of each, whatever contract we have.
So both the defined benefit and the defined contribution say you do not get a disability pension if you are here for less than 10 years.
So you can change that if you had contribution or benefit. right?
You could, but again, going back to the point on defined contribution, if you're here for even, let's say, 5 years and you are injured in the line of duty, you're walking away with a lump sum amount of money, which if you're lucky would be $20,000. That's not a significant, I mean, if you now can't work for the rest of your life and you're going on disability, that's,
I'd like to know how this works with other municipalities.
most other are on defined benefit,
Really?
at least for fire department. And that's also something from a recruitment and retention standpoint we're gonna come up against. Because why would I come here if I'm getting a defined contribution plan when I can go somewhere else and be on a defined benefit?
Private industry.
That too,
That's when
but,
your benefits are great.
so I mean, again, for the purpose of today, it's really just food for thought for a future conversation. So I
Yeah.
have that additional information.
I think you need to understand. We see the problem.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely understand that. We feel like we really came to light with the recent last year, and we just want to make sure that, thankfully,
He was covered.
covered sites is still able to work, but if you get to the point where you're not, the likelihood of one of us getting injured is way more significant than, maybe, I don't want to say it's the office staff, but to be honest, it is.
Say it.
So we just want to make sure that, our families are still protected, because,
Yeah, we see the problem, we gotta figure out the way to get the best.
We have
Way to
disability
get there.
insurance, just with disability insurance.
Workers' comp, disability insurance, yes.
When I worked, with 3 kids at home and stuff, I paid a lot of money for disability if I fell over, had a heart attack, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
but a lot of times, the problem you're gonna have to find in that type of insurance is to find one that covers on the job.
Yeah.
And it's changed, it's not.
So I'll make a motion to table that.
Motion and second. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
The problem.
All right.
I have
Any public comment? Oh, did you have one more thing? Sorry.
executive session.
Oh, you killed me.
It'll be quick and painless, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you. God, stayed awake the whole time, that was impressive.
Oh, should be walking out executive session.
Yes, it's not pertaining to the police department. Thank you. And I will
Just the way signed it. the contract.
stop recording.
Call us back to order? Right. Call the meeting back to order to adjourn. Yes? Do I need a motion to adjourn?
Just a meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.